So I'm going to talk to you about, well, today we call it Lean UX in the experience economy. In reality, it's my practice and the work that I've done for the last 20 years that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to cover some of the aspects of how to become faster at getting to really, really strong products and a strong understanding of what's really important for customers. So how many of you saw Søren Brogaard earlier today? Okay, so Søren and I, we go way back, and a lot of the stuff we've done around this area, kind of we weave in and out of each other's lives, at least when we live on the same continent. And so some of the examples are actually work that we did, and some of the things he mentioned, you will see myself referring to that. But I better get going. So I want to cover three things. Why Lean UX now? What is Lean UX? And also, how can we use Lean UX? Because one thing is to know all the theories, and I can show you a lot of things. They might look easy from stage, but when you try them in real life, you run into all sorts of issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, if time permits, towards the end. My path to this customer-centric way of working. This year I had a 20-year anniversary. Straight when I came from school, I started straight into Nokia, and the first project I did was 3210. The mobile phone that's really set a lot of standards for what mobile phones should be. I spent 12 years at Nokia with the rise and the fall, and I can say that one of the reasons why I'm so obsessed with customer centricity is that we had it at the start at the Nokia time, and we kind of lost it. And I've been working since those tragic days of 2007-8. To figure out how does that actually work. From there, I went to Silicon Valley. I worked at Amazon. I headed up the UX labs in Silicon Valley for Amazon, among other. I went to eBay and PayPal and worked for how to build design culture there and how to make design practices a common strategic tool. Upon returning last year, I've worked a lot with Trifork and other teams, while also studying, not studying this time, but lecturing at the design school here in Holmen and parts of my time at Cranfield University in UK. And lately started at Designrådet, the Danish Design Council, to help bring in the design thinking practices more common into the design industry there. So why Lean UX now? And I want to start with a picture, and I want you to see if you are all awake. So can you guess what this picture depicts? And there are some clues, right? There's some structural elements that look pretty familiar up in the corners, and maybe a profile of a church. Anyone know about this story? Yeah? It's the Eiffel Tower, yes. And there's a little dot suspended in there somewhere in the picture. Can you all see it? Do you know what it is? It's a very, very failed product launch. That's what it is. Let's have a look. So in 1912, this guy, Franz Reichel, he had developed a wingsuit. And he had called for the whole world press to come and see the launch of this wingsuit that he was going to fly himself. He did not know about Lean UX. Because let's see what happened to the guy. And this is actual. And he's carried away by the I think everyone was shocked, maybe not too surprised. But, and I think that this says it all. Someone was measuring the depth of the hole that he left in the ground. And so this is a picture of what happens when you don't get your product work right, and you end up launching something that's actually a very expensive prototype. And let's do something about that today, preventing that. So in this customer experience economy, design thinking, the way that we express it, it's really the way that all the functions of the company can get together to work creatively at the onstart. That's the way that I use design thinking now. So it's a number of tools and thinking styles so that you can go rapid and lean into your product development. And we're going to look at that. So the classic BDT triangle, meeting in the middle, and we want to focus around the user experience at this point in time. Why? Because launching successful products today is all about getting the user experience right. As soon as you figure out what the users need to experience, you can start building your tech systems and your design systems and your business models from there. Lean UX then is a set of rapid prototyping to get that user experience done first. So it's a set of learning cycles where we just continually pound that drum of how do we get the customer to experience what the customer needs, and then we can add those technology, business, and interface design layers to it. So that means that the Lean UX becomes that engine that sits at the center of what we do as a collaborative, highly diverse team. And in this presentation, I want to show you some examples. I want to show you a video from some work that I did some months ago while in India, and also talk a little bit about how you can bring that into your own company and into your own work. Good. And I also want to mention that startups and companies that have gone agile, they are at an advantage point right now because they are used to kind of the cycle and the speed and the testing. All they need to do is add some of that customer centricity and some of the tools. While grown and mature companies, they're challenged on multiple parts, mostly on the culture of the front end that's not there. And I can talk a little bit about that towards the end. So let's talk about the Lean UX. First of all, I want to talk about Lean UX requires empathy. The first thing we do when we start these projects is to say, no matter what we're trying to do, we need to build customer empathy. So here are some cards that we did at PayPal, a practice that we started while I was there. So every time we went to the field, we took a picture of the people we interviewed and we wrote their story on the backside of those cards. And only the people who had been at the interview were permitted to share those pictures and print the pictures. They were printed, looking a lot like Polaroids, and then people shared them at their desks. So you can see here's at Christmas time in the Paris office, someone is really happy because they've collected some empathy. They've understood some customers, and that's a great thing. So let's go and go to Chennai together. How many people have been in Chennai here, visited Chennai, India? Yes, it's a super busy town. It's a very interesting town. Some people call it the Silicon Valley of India. India is getting to 1 billion of people, country that is doing a tiger lab into the digital world. So we went there with PayPal to figure out how could we launch PayPal as a domestic brand in India. So everyone in India knew, a lot of people knew PayPal, but they knew it as a brand that you would use when you bought something from outside. And now we needed to go in and figure out what did people actually expect of a modern fintech brand nowadays. And this is some photos from that session. So we brought the product manager from San Jose, California. We brought the design lead from New York City. We brought the product marketing person from Mumbai, and we brought the engineering lead from California as well. Yeah, let's roll that and get a little more volume. Let's get some.
What we're really trying to do here is understand what is PayPal's story for India. We started this year with problem discovery CDI, where we really got into the emotional understanding of what people really want and what are the pain points they have with online shopping. And we took those learnings as starting points for the solution discovery CDI, which was this whole intense 5-day workshop.
I can actually take these prototypes, walk across to my dev team and give it to them, and they'd be able to start working on it. And I think that is extremely powerful. The fact that like 1 week ago, we didn't even know what we wanted to build, and then a week later, we actually have a document or a design that we can give to our engineering team to work on it.
The fact that we were able to hear from customers what they want and how they want it is actually very helpful for us to go back and say, can we build it the way that the customers want it? And it also kind of takes away a lot of assumptions from our mind. So it's now real data that we have.
Yeah, so this third concept is around aggregate payments. And we decided to call it PayPal Credit just so people understand what it means.
It's such an exciting time to be a part of doing things the right way in developing products and selling them to market. My views coming out of this about what we need to do to launch in India are completely different to my views going into this, and I think anyone who's in a decision-making role in regards to a new market launch should also have the benefit of that process.
Card on delivery, the guy comes with an easy tap, the dongle, and then he just takes it.
I like that we can be contrarian, we can be bold, we can really explore new ideas, and then we can rapidly go from hey, we're talking to a customer, to hey, we've got a sketch on a piece of paper, to hey, we've got a design that is, black, it's grayscale, it's not that interesting, it doesn't look like PayPal, to hey, now we have PayPal designed.
For me, this whole session did not feel like work. It was like I am following my passion.
This is the first time we are interviewing real customers and getting to know how a product is going to be built from scratch.
I think the entire 5 days was feeling like a scrappy startup. The workshop is over, but our work has just begun. And now we're going to think of how we're going to package all of this together. And next stop, Singapore and San Jose. And hopefully the whole company is as excited about India as we are.
Good. So what happened here? Was that this team that came from all over the world was supposed to go back and sit in each their own camps, which happens a lot in global companies, and trying to build something for a customer that they had that they didn't know, and they didn't know about how they lived their lives. So before this session, we had taken the core team and sent them around in tier 1, 2, and 3 cities for about 2 weeks to visit people in their homes. And during the workshop, we had about 35 different types of Indian users or consumers to come in and interview. So Jacob was a really interesting example because he's a real New Yorker guy. He's been living in Manhattan and doing Manhattan-ish things for 20 years. And coming to India was a big experience for him. Let's hear what he has to say.
A big moment for me was when our first interviewer was talking about him giving his phone to coworkers and letting them shop on his phone. And it was just like, you would just never do that in the US. It was just like, that's inconceivable. And if you were told that that happened, you would probably assume that it was something that was only happening in only rare occasions, and not, in his case, every day. That's a really different interaction. That's a really different way of using technology. And I love moments like that. So that'll stick with me.
So one happy design lead there. So what we did is that we took a meeting room, converted it into a design studio, brought in all the monitors and designers, and put a sticker on the door, don't disturb. And they actually sat and built and did UX design work and visual design work all week with the user testing studios happening around them. Super effective. Another person, ideation, you saw that. But another person that we need to hear from is the product manager. Product managers at this day in time, it's really hard for them to actually master doing great products because it's not about the business case anymore only. It's about user experience. And they are often left with very little tools to actually explore and write their requirements on what exactly are the users supposed to experience if it's brand new and they never saw anything like it before. So she was really, really happy to do Lean UX with us.
What was unique about the process we did in day 3, which you don't tend to see elsewhere, is that you as a product manager may have some ideas or thoughts or validations that makes sense, but in day 3, being able to actually see other people either echo what your ideas were or provide an argument which helped kind of disprove your hypothesis was extremely powerful.
Okay, well, one of the things that we did, and that's what she referred to, and you saw that little wall there, is some of the things that we do when we do this Lean UX. We shift between, also as Søren Brogaard mentioned, we build experience prototypes, we test them, and then we try to figure out what we just learned, putting them into some frameworks. This is one of the best frameworks for us to very rapidly figure out what to build and what to do more of. So if we look at our ability to solve severe customer pain or just light customer pain in the vertical axis versus how easy would it be for PayPal at this point, PayPal in India, to launch and operate these products. The concepts that would sit up there to the right would be the ones to go for the MVP and for the pilot. The ones to the left would be the ones that we would put into our stack for development, further development, both business-wise, regulatory, and also figuring out be more precisely about experiences. The ones to the lower right would be the ones that we could sprinkle into the current product portfolio or just kind of quick fixes. And then the ones to the lower left are the insignificant ones that we could forget about. And often when we come out and we do these rapid cycles, companies, they will realize that they have spent years and millions of dollars on stuff that's actually not asked for anymore. And the wise companies will stop, and the ones who will not listen, they will continue until they are stopped. So let's skip Jacob because I have something more. But Jacob just talked about how this studio that I just mentioned before, how that was set up in the middle of all this learning so that the designers could get the input and test out their ideas immediately. At day 5, we did this storytelling. And if you recall from the video, we had the VP or the head of Asia marketing showing up, and she was completely surprised because she had actually lived and traveled around and talked with agencies all over Asia. But being there and talking with real customers around real experiences had opened her mind, and she figured out that it's not about that it was completely different from what she had thought, and they were now going to figure out how to change that whole marketing story based on that experience. So I want to talk about, just zoom out a little bit and talk a little bit into process. So I mentioned to you before that we send people out to do field work, and that's also what we do here in Europe and what I've done in US. It's not enough to invite people into a lab or a meeting room and drill them because they will not necessarily tell you what's actually happening. They will tell you what they think is happening. But by going there, going into the real world and observing, you will see what they do, and you will see some of the things that are part of their blind spots. So based on all this work, you will come out with some themes that we can bring in and start working on as a broad development team. And we go with this 5 days sprint. So I know that there's a lot. The Google Sprint book that probably a lot of you have read also talks about 5-day sprint. And from those 20 years of experience I have running these, I can tell you why it's 5-day sprint. First of all, it's about as much as you can beat and pound on a normal team that are not used to these tools. They get super exhausted. So 5 days is about the top. Also, 5 days is about the top that you can get the A players of the team and the organization to come join you. If you ask for 5 weeks, not at all. If you ask for 5 months, you will not get those guys. You will get the guys that are for the project, for the core. But if you want to open it up and say who is the best people for marketing, who are the best people for technology, 5 days is about the time that you get, and that's what we use. So how are we using those? Empathy, as I said, we do 1 day of empathy, 1 day of ideation, 1 day of filtering and selecting, 1 day of iteration, and 1 day of telling the story, so that this actually becomes something that the company can use in their further life. And the actual 5-day workshop, the way that you can talk about it, you don't use the Lean UX language. You use the language there towards the bottom, which is the language that the people, the sponsors, actually use in their everyday. So you have to translate your Lean UX lingo and design thinking lingo into something that the decision makers actually understand and they can relate to. So you get customer segmentation, you get idea catalogs, you get a solution portfolio and roadmaps, and that's the kind of words that they understand, not necessarily filter and select and those kind of terms. And then from there, we go into agile development. So someone asked Søren how they fit together. To me, they fit really nicely together. Both of them are really about acting and learning first and foremost. But in agile development, we start to see this cycle of development. And one thing that sometimes fails in software companies and other places is that from the get-go, you have a lot of empathy and a lot of great ideas and understanding. But then the guys who carry that knowledge, they taper off, and the development team and the product manager are on their own. And for every cycle, they get a little further away from how they actually started with an onset. So you have to keep coming back to the market. You have to keep coming back and talking with real customers to see if what you're doing still makes sense, or if you are starting to work on some kind of illusion that you're doing customer-centric work while you're actually sitting in your own room and just hammering in every day without looking up. So you have to look up. And as I say, at least every second Friday, you have to look up and make that customer day and get out of that room and to get into the real world. So this is my vision for how to actually get this going. 3 sections: the customer research, getting the full team into the field and really understand the sprint style of bringing the customer in to a diverse team, and then the agile development where the team continuously checks in with the reality and don't stay at home in their office. And if we look at that little part there in the middle of this process description, we have to do our assumption testing in all steps. And at working with Trifork the last year, we've been practicing on how you can do that with people during that 5-day sprint. And bringing in customers on a daily basis actually works, even though it feels to a lot of customers and organization, it feels a little awkward. How can we continuously keep talking with customers and what they learn when they go through this lean UX work is that yes, we talk with customers, but we talk with them about different things depending on the mindset. So during the ideation on day one, it's about empathy and not talking about solutions, but understanding what life they want to live, what types of problems that they face, and kind of just figuring out what are the themes of, and areas, what are the things that they dream of, what are the things they want to accomplish, and how can we help them. On the ideation day, we invite customers that are a little more on the creative side and a little more, how can I say, people that are a little more accustomed to expressing their ideas, if we have a choice. One of the best projects I've done was when we did accessibility strategy work for telecoms in a project, and we invited designers with different handicaps. So we had a blind software developer, we had a fashion designer with arthritis, and we had a teacher with in a wheelchair. And getting people that live a full life with those certain problems that we want to address and have a creative aura is fantastic. It's a lead user scenario you get where people are actually able to express how kind of more nuanced how they need to live their life. But obviously you can talk with normal people and use ethnographic tools to get a lot of value from them. So those are ways that we keep going. Also, I want to talk to you about the prototypes because you saw in the video from Chennai that we focused a lot on these paper prototype software experiences, which are important, but you can also do a lot more and a lot of different things. So let's just go through some of them. For example, when you want to work and understand a new business case, why not set up a business case spreadsheet? So say, if we did this solution the way we did, how would a month in your business look like using this solution? In that way, you get to talk with the CFOs of this world and the CEOs of this world and figure out what are their needs. Then you could go with a company pamphlet, which is like a little folder. Either it's a little PDF you can ship around, or maybe it's a little print guide that talks about the value proposition. And in that way, you can get to talk to a lot of ordinary people about this solution to a problem that we want to learn a little bit more about. And also, if you cannot print it on a simple folder, chances are that you don't know what you're doing, right? So it's a really, really good exercise to just try and do a simple A5 folder, print folder, take it to the print shop and look what comes back, if it still makes sense. The digital version is a landing page where you can do a lot of conversion testing. You can put up bold statements and then put a button that says learn more. And then you can actually do a very, very quick test on does this have traction or not? Of all the people who land on this page, how many would actually have liked to learn more of this concept? Finally, you can also do a value proposition showcase video. And we've done that. The process of getting to a 2 or 3 minute video that expresses a concept more thoroughly. Think of a Kickstarter-like movie. That process is extremely valuable because you actually end up developing your concept while you are thinking in storytelling modes. Then you have that choreographed product experience down there to the left, which is, you can see it looks like a little theater, and you can kind of fake your way to a product experience before you get any line of code done. And where that started was we did, for example, ATMs were made of a little box, and people could punch in. But then inside there was a little bank clerk who was actually doing the work and putting out paper slips to see what kind of tone of voice and what kind of features actually worked. And in that way, You will also hear it referred to as a ghost in the machine or Wizard of Oz if you talk with some of those lean UX guys. Those are those concepts that you do. Really, really powerful stuff to learn. And the storyboard for the experience, just say, well, if this was a play, let's write the script for who are the characters and what do they accomplish. Very, very strong way of doing prototyping too for experience. And then finally, the more kind of traditional prototype, putting a learning, clickable, shallow front end, and then also working on a back end, and then have some people connect the two dots. Often, if you work in e-commerce, you would do a landing page, and people would say, "I want to buy this." And instead of hooking them on to some payments, you just send an email, and then there will again be some clerk somewhere running the payments in manual works. So if we rearrange these, I want to talk about how to do prototyping a little bit and why we do prototyping. So let's look at 2 dimensions for prototyping. If you think about fidelity, the fidelity of a prototype or any solution is how well it resembles the final product. So high fidelity prototypes are made with the right typography, with the right materials, with the right size, with the right materials. Low fidelity are made with paper, cardboard, big boxes, and what have you. And when we look at the resolution of a concept is how much of the functionality, of the end functionality, is actually expressed in that prototype. So if it's an e-commerce page, if you do a low res, maybe it's just the check-in, and if you do a high res, it's the full experience, right? So let's put some examples up. Paper prototyping, super powerful. You should always do a paper prototype, and you should always be doing paper prototyping of any experience that you want to do before you do any code. Hypermarketing. So imagine that you say, let's just skip expressing the solution and just talk about how we want to sell it. Because with those talking points, we can realize if people would buy it at all, if they would ever get to your code, right? So anyone know of June, the product of June service? Yeah. So Danske Bank had a landing page for June up for 8 months during last year. That was no more than a hypermarketing prototype with some learn more and sign me up. Super powerful way of learning something. For those high resolution, low fidelity, very typical engineering type, so principal prototypes, you say you go to the engineering department and they have this big box with all these wires coming out, and they say, yeah, this is the product we're going to do, and then we're going to shrink it into this package, right? So that means that it's low fidelity, but it has a very high resolution because it actually does what you want it to do. It's very, very hard to test these kind of prototypes on people. And sometimes you see companies that try to kind of bring in this big bulky thing into to the sales and say, you want to buy this? And chances are that not a lot of people can see what you see when you see that. And then finally, pilot prototypes and kind of high fidelity, high resolution prototypes where it actually does everything and it looks like it, but in reality, it's perhaps not very scalable. Perhaps it's run on software that could not scale from 1,000 pilot accounts to 1 million, right? So you also want to build some of those and test them. But what you also have to see is that you need to go through progressions, right? So you need to go through progressions from left to right. And a lot of times when we go into projects and I work with companies, there's this creep that people say, oh, we want to do it much better, Michael. Let's just make a high fidelity prototype at first go. And what I say no, I shy away from those, because if you spend a lot of money, you are afraid of killing it. And the reason you build prototypes is to kill them and learn from it. You have to be able to scrap any prototype that you build and being happy about it because you've learned something. So I remember once at Nokia, we had built this super realistic new product. We found someone in New York that could build it, and it had cost $100,000. And we carried it into this meeting, and the VP was trying it around, and then oops, and it died. And that was the last time I did such an expensive prototype for that type of project. Absolutely. Because the higher quality the prototype, the less you invite for co-creation and comments for change, right? Because it's your darling. People don't want to upset. They don't want to upset themselves. They said, holy crap, we spent 3 months building this and I actually don't like it. I better keep quiet. And the risk is that this bad concept actually continues a little too long. So the idea of lean for lean UX is to go to the experience and do it fast, to learn, to correct, and only promote great stuff, right? So only build the minimum prototype possible to satisfy that current learning goal you have. Don't kind of overemphasize and say, hey, if we just spend another week and put some gloss, we could also use it for the car show or the trade show or whatever, because it's actually going to lose its purpose. And I want to talk, how am I for time? Yeah, that's good. Because I want to talk a little bit about how we could use Lean UX. So I showed you some and talked about some of the principles and some of the methodology that we use in the field. I don't know how you feel, but at least I find them pretty simple. Because the issue with Lean UX is not the theory, it's the practice. It's to do it. Because there are all sorts of reasons why you're not doing it. While thinking of it, I put some solutions in. I said, at least from my experience, we need to work on 3 layers. We need to work on the central one, the practitioner layer, digital concept making, this way of doing 5 steps and getting really quick at those mindsets and having a team around you that understand what that implies. Building concepts, accelerate the product development process, getting some of the new design tools embedded in the organization. But you also need to go to the leadership and get real sponsors, which is often one of where Lean UX and other new methodologies fail, because it's so incredibly hard to express the value of this until you have been in it. Remember the marketing VP from that video, she said, going into this, I had a completely different idea of what we were to do than coming out of this. And I see that again and again, that sponsors and senior people, it's really hard to them to figure out what the hell is going on in these whirlwinds of sprints. So we need to invite them. We need to tell the story for them in words that they understand. And we also need to work with them to inspire them. You also heard earlier that companies like Trifork and others do these safaris where they invite senior leaders to places where these new processes are being done. I see them as part of this whole inspiration and figuring out your maturity as a company. So you need to work, or you need to make sure that work is being done on the most senior level, that there's an aspiration and a readiness to go these ways. Otherwise, the practitioners will have to work undercover, and it seldomly goes well for very long working undercover in a company, even though it has to be done at times. But vetting the appetite, figuring out what it is that you want to do, establishing actual programs. So in my time, I've done several practitioner training courses, and the successful ones were always supported by a C-level sponsor, and these kind of partisan ways of doing things, they only survived for very, very short time. So super important, this whole senior leadership thing. The culture anchor is the last thing. So one thing that I hear a lot when we do these workshops for a week is that people are very excited. They're like energized and like, oh, we can't stop. This is the best thing. And then they come back on the Monday morning and the world is the same. They have changed, but the company didn't change, which actually brings a lot of frustration. And for some of these innovation manager executive educations is up to about 50% of the people who are trained in these tools, they end up quitting their job because they cannot make the rest of the company change with them. So they've been kind of ousted, or they have ousted themselves. So we have to work on the culture of innovation, and we have to work on that whole kind of story of what it is that we do. So getting design thinkers in to inspire, getting the storytellers in to inspire, and also establishing new ways and new goals to work from that are more towards the lean, agile way of working, so that people can live out their passion and doing a great job, and not the opposite. Good. So let me finish on that. Just to recap, if you want to build a sustainable design culture that is capable of using Lean UX, you have to have support from the top. You have to build a dedicated practitioner layer. And you have at most times you need an orchestrated change management on an organization level, and then Lean UX becomes super simple. Yes? That's what I had. And I want to open to see if we could have some, if there are some Q&As.
There is. I will take it from the bottom. How much are the customers involved participating in the 5-day sprint?
Okay, so customers are involved in those 5-day sprints that I do day one. So they need to come and express their actual needs for the full team. So it's not enough that a couple of them have been out doing field work and they come back very inspired and say, oh, these are all the things. The people, they have to see and hear and be super close to customers expressing the problems that we need. So that's day one. Day two, co-creation, ideation, getting ideas made. It's not that you can ask customers to give you the concepts, but if they are around while you do your concept making, you can test some of your assumptions with them real time. We also involve customers in the iteration that we do for prototyping. So we build a version of a prototype in the morning, invite someone in before lunch, reiterate in the afternoon, and invite some more in at the evening. And if it's a global company with a kind of offices, other places, I've also had other offices doing tests over the night, so that when you show up on the last day, you actually have some more test data. So you involve them at least in those 3 levels. The filtering and sorting, not so much. And the storytelling, of course, they're involved, but it's their story that we tell. We don't tell it to them. So that's how they're involved.
Thanks. How to solve the situation where all ideas are of high value and feasible to implement?
Yeah, that's a good one. You have to step back and work a little bit more nuanced on your criteria, because if you have a bundle of dots in the space that sits on top of each other, if you zoom out and you start stretching that space, you will learn more. So typically, the beginner's problem in this is that everything is important and everything is urgent, and it all ends up in the same quadrant. And all we do is we need to just stretch that space and learn a little bit more. So go back a little to assumption work before you go into the filter session if you end up bundling everything there. And also, if you think of MVP, you will also have to just figure out where to start. So make a starting point that can give you value and give you learning almost from onset. That's a very good place to start. Going with something that would require a lot of work before you could get feedback is not a good place to start. So there's always some of your concepts that are easier to learn from than others, and those are the places you should start. Yes?
Cool. A few more questions. How do you handle companies with 80% PowerPoint management as Nokia was? I remember your sessions there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, actually. Yeah. For a long time, I've abandoned PowerPoints from my sessions full week, except for the end storytelling on day 5. We need to create a PowerPoint show because people, they need something that they can use to carry back to the organization when they come home, when they return again. So just get people, give PowerPoint a break and start doing real work. It's a very good, PowerPoint is good, it's really, really good for something, but not for design work, not for design work. Yes?
Last question, perhaps. How do you recruit the right customers to participate in the right amount?
Great question. So the way that it's done, it's an iteration. And the way that I've seen is that if we have time permitted, we take the whole core team out to do a couple of interviews a little in advance, and then we go and we talk about what we saw, and we figure out that we could circle in on a couple of generic or global problem themes. And from the global problem themes, you start to craft a screener that says we want to talk to customers who within the last 3 months have experienced some of our key problems. So for example, at PayPal, I was going out to work for solutions around credit card fraud in Italy. And so the screener we did, we said we want to talk with people who have completed a transaction online within the last 3 months and have had their credit card cloned and hacked within the last 3 months. Because then the pain and the wound is fresh and people actually remember what happened. If you spend time, valuable time, and you do not make a strong screener, chances are that you will have to speak to 10 until someone expresses that core problem that you want to address. So you have to work on your screeners and make sure that the people you talk to, they have real experiences of the kind of problems that you want to solve. Yes?
Excellent. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.